Okay, welcome everyone. I see our participants have started to join. I will just give it a few moments for the participants to sign in, and while we do that, I would like to ask those that are online to please make use of the chat function. Just pop us a message with your name and where you are from. Once we are ready, I will begin the session. And so for those of you who are joining now, please use the chat function. Let us know who you are and where you are from. Okay, our members seem to be a little shy. We have the first one, Amira from Greenville, North Carolina. Welcome. So we already have our first international student. We have Alyssa as well. Welcome, Alyssa. Allison, also from this is Northern California. Welcome. And we have Alyssa from South Africa. Jacky from Lumpur, welcome from Malaysia. So we do have quite an international audience today. Welcome, members. For those signing in now, we are just allowing participants to sign in. If you want to make use of the chat function, just to let us know who you are and where you are from. I see we have Lucia from Johannesburg, Adele from Austin, Texas. We have Morgan from South Africa. Welcome, everyone. So those of you signing in now, if you would like to use the chat function, just let us know who you are and where you are from. We will just allow a few moments for the rest of the participants to sign in. We have Selena from Canada. Welcome. I do apologize in advance if I do mispronounce your name. Please forgive me. I'm going to attempt this. I'm sure it is Magritte from South Africa. Welcome. I will just give it a few more moments. We have Christina from Spain, Rotabile from Pretoria. We have Stephanie from Little Rock. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining. We are just allowing the rest of the participants to sign in. And while we do that, please use the chat function just to pop us a message with your name and where you're from. We have LaShawn from Colombia. Welcome. We have George from the Virgin Islands. Okay, I'm going to begin the session now. I think we can start. We have Crystal all the way from Atlanta. Welcome. Thank you for joining. I know it is very early for some of you. For those of you joining internationally, I know most of you are starting your day. It is currently 6 p.m. in South Africa, so I'm going to do my introduction for Jacky now before handing over. So before I introduce our speaker, Jacky, I would first like to mention during the session, Jacky will do her presentation. You guys, if you want to comment, you're more than welcome to use the chat function. However, in the last 20 minutes, we will open the Q&A, which you can then use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to pop us a message or direct a message to Jacky. And we will try our best to make sure that every question is answered. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker. Jacky Pillay is an alumni of the Golden Key International Honor Society and a psychology honors graduate of the University of Pretoria. Her background in psychology provided a solid foundation for her to venture into the world of recruitment, where she went on to build an impressive track record of over 13 years. During this time, she has honed her skills to the point that she is now recognized as a specialist in IT and financial sector recruitment. She employs a holistic approach to recruitment by focusing not just on the employer requirements, but the candidate experience, organizational culture, and comprehensive job profiling. I will now hand you over to Jacky.
Thank you, Natasha. Welcome everybody to the last in our series of How to Land Your Perfect Job. This is actually my favorite one because I really do enjoy prepping people for job interviews, because I feel like the more prepared you are, the better you are in these situations, and the more likely you are to be successful. So the job interview, let's jump straight into it. It's a very unusual situation. So the job interview, you're put in a room you've never been in with a person you've never met to talk about a company you don't work at in order to persuade somebody you're excellent at a job that you don't have. So obviously that feels like a really big feat. But tonight we're going to go through it in, obviously different stages to prepare you for this big thing called the job interview. So if like I said, the more successful you are, or the more you practice, the more successful you'll be. So let's talk about being interview fit. So the more you do something, the better you're at it. So you've got your CV, you've got your cover letter beefed up, your LinkedIn profile's all done, and now you've landed that interview. And now what? If you were a long distance runner and you were preparing for a marathon, you wouldn't just pitch up on race day and not have, exercised it all or prepared it all. So, think about interviewing in the same way. So preparation is the first step. So you need to practice, and we're going to become interview fit. So the more you go through it, the more you practice it, the more time you put into it, the more interview fit you'll be, and the more relaxed you'll be in that situation. So or confident rather. So the more prepared you are, the more confident you're going to come across during your interview. So I'm also going to touch on the different types of interviews, so your competency-based versus your unstructured interviews, and how to prepare for both of these. So, or a combination of these. So if you are, presented with either one of these in a situation, that you know how to handle them. And then practice interview questions. So it seems silly, but practice your interview questions. The more you practice them, the more natural it will come across when you answer a certain question. So interviews tend to, most of the time have the same sort of format, or have similar questions that you can go through. But the more you practice them, the more confident and comfortable you'll feel. So we'll go through that as well. And then it's also about doing your research. If you've attended any of the other two webinars I've hosted, you'll know that research is like my favorite keyword, but it's very valuable to me, and it's very important to do your research on the company, on the role that you're interviewing for, because the more you know, like knowledge is power, that old time saying, the more you know, the more prepared you'll be, and the more relaxed you'll be in that situation. So how do we prepare for an interview? So basic preparation is, know the basic things. So if you're doing it on your own, or you're doing it through a recruiter, if you have a recruiter assisting you, they're going to tell you the place and the location and the time. If you've gone directly to an employer, make sure you find out those things, with regards to location and the actual, building and the place that you're going to. So great, it's in Centurion or wherever, but where are you going to? So do a Google search, that Google Earth thing, where you can actually see where you're going, so that, again, it's about preparation. You know where you're going, and you'll be less stressed. If you get lost on the day, or if you can't find the building and all that, by the time you walk into your interview, you're going to be flustered, you're going to be more nervous, and then your preparation might go to the wayside. Know who you're interviewing with. Again, if you're working through a recruiter, and a half decent one, they should give you this information, the individual you're recruiting for, interviewing with, and their designation, and then go do a little bit of homework. So you look them up on LinkedIn, go see how long they've been at that organization, where they were before. It'll give you a little bit of insight, especially if this is the line manager as compared to HR that you're interviewing with. The more information you have, you'll have a better idea. And then specific facts about the company. So I hope by the time that you've landed the job interview, you've done a little bit of research into who you're interviewing with. But again, you're going to go back onto their website. You're going to go look, who they are, what are their values, what's important to them, because you're probably going to be faced with a question down the line of, why do you want to work for this organization? And you should be able to answer that if you've done this homework, because you're going to look at, how their values align to your values, why your career goals align with the type of organization that you're interviewing with. And then prepare to ask questions. It seems silly, and people always say, you have to ask questions, but it's a very, very important part of an interview that look at, again, going back to my favorite word, research. Do the research about the company and the role that you're applying for, and then apply that into the questions that you've answered. Another basic thing is what you wear. I always say overdress rather than underdress. So if you are dress for the job that you want, I would rather go there in a suit than arrive there in jeans and a button-up shirt. I'd rather be overdressed than underdressed. So overdressed shows that you're taking things seriously, whereas underdressed shows me that you're not really caring about this opportunity. Overdress, and if you get the job, you can find out about their dress code. If it's a little bit more relaxed, then so be it. And your winning attitude. So bring your personality. A job interview is a two-way street. So it's not just about a company hounding you about questions about who you are and where you come from and your skills and experience. It's also about you finding out about them and your interviewer experiencing who you are as an individual. So bring that winning attitude, show your personality, because that's important. A talent will get you in the door, but your character is going to keep you in the room. Let's look at the basic do's and don'ts of an interview situation. So do arrive on time, or 5 minutes early max. Greet the interviewer by name. So say, hi, Jane, I'm Jacky, because surely by the time you're in the room, you're going to know who this individual is and why you're interviewing. A firm handshake, or in COVID-19 times, little elbow bump will do. Or it's a difficult situation. I've interviewed during COVID. We literally just stood apart from each other and gave a little hi, and that'll do. So take that cue in our current situation from the person that you're interviewing with. Keep eye contact with your interviewer, so it shows that you're engaged, and smile. Just relax and have fun. Enjoy the situation as much as you can, because essentially at the end of the day, it's a learning situation. So even if you bomb out on a few questions or something, try and enjoy the situation as much as possible. The don'ts. Oh no, sorry, my slide has confused me a little bit. Sorry about that. So the don'ts, don't answer with yes or no. So most questions are going to be open-ended. So don't, if somebody asks you something, say, yes, I've done that. And then, there's this awkward silence and stuff like that. Always follow up with an example, leading back to previous experience, that type of thing. Try and explain yourself as much as possible. Describe what you've done, in previous roles. Don't lie. It will always come out if you've lied. Answer questions truthfully, frankly, and as close to the point as possible. So don't embellish too much. Try not badmouth a previous employer. And this is always a question I get asked about, what if it was a really bad experience? If you've had a bad experience, that's fine. A lot of people have bad experiences, but try and put it in a positive light. Don't just badmouth them or give a derogatory statement about a previous employer. If you've had a bad experience, try and just sort of spin it in a way that try and get the light out of it, essentially. Our goals didn't align or something like that. Don't be too late or too early. So too late in the fact, like, anything longer than 10 minutes is too late. So an interviewer will probably get up and leave after 10 to 15 minutes. And don't be too early, because respect people's time. Your interviewer had things to do today. they had your appointment scheduled for 10 o'clock. If you arrive at 9:30, they're going to feel obligated to see you, but maybe they had another meeting or a few things to tie up before they met with you. So it's just going to be a little awkward. So try and just be, 5 minutes early. 5 minutes early is great. You can sit in reception, grab a glass of water, compose yourself. You know where you are. It gives you time to calm down before you're there, but not half an hour early. And don't have your phone on. Try, keep it in your pocket, put it on silent. Don't put it on the table. Don't take it out. Don't even take it out of your pocket or your bag or whatever. Just put it on silent and put it away, or put it off. Put it off would be the best. There's nothing worse than somebody answering their phone during an interview, or their phone ringing, and they're picking it up and they're looking at it, and you want to go like, oh, okay, do you have a little bit better things to do than sit here with me today? So just, put it off or put it on silent and put it in your pocket. You can deal with whoever you need to deal with when you're done with your interview. The types of interviews that you might be faced with. So there are two types of interviews that you'll probably be faced with during, your interviewing time, or it'll be a combination of both. So chances are it's going to be a combination of both. You get a competency-based interview and you get an unstructured interview. So a competency-based interview is usually behavioral or situational. So skills questionnaires. They look at your skills and your previous experience. They look at how you approach problems, tasks, and challenges. There will be specifically predetermined questions. So every interview will be exactly the same. They'll literally have a little piece of paper with the interview's questions printed out, so that they're able to compare all candidates the same, because they've answered all the same or asked all the same questions. And then determining your experience, your expertise, and your cultural fit to the organization. Not that unstructured interviews don't necessarily cover some of these things, but competency-based are very, but I'll cover it more in detail. It's probably like your STAR method interview. And then the plus side of a competency-based interview is they do remove the risk of bias. So because it's a standard set that everyone gets asked, like every single candidate will be asked the same questions and expected to answer the same thing. So they get to compare apples with apples, so to speak. Then you get an unstructured interview. So an unstructured interview would be generally not predetermined. So, more of those people that come out of unstructured interviews will say, oh, it didn't really feel like an interview. It felt like more of a conversation than an interview. So they might not have a predetermined, topic that they want to cover. So it'll just be finding out more about you and your experience, focused on your career history. So where have you been before? What have you done? It'll flow like everyday conversation. So you'll sit there, you'll speak to this person, they'll find out a little bit more about you. And like I said, a lot of people that walk out of unstructured interviews will say it felt more like a conversation and less like an interview. And it'll be more informal and open-ended. So not as rigid and structured and expecting you to answer in a certain way. So tips on how to answer a behavioral interview, so your competency-based interview. A competency-based interview is going to be built around a job description. So study that job description. So when you get invited for your interview, ask for a copy of the job description, and then you're going to look, usually at the bottom of that, they're going to have competencies. So you're going to look at those competencies, what they're looking for, and then relate those to your competencies. And then do a little bit of research on how to answer questions on certain things and practice those questions. You're going to look at reviewing major projects or achievements that you've done. So revisit, previous job performance, make a list of your, making a list of professional accomplishments as well. And then, be open and honest when it comes to answering these questions. But you're going to have practiced it, so it's fine. And then use good examples. So if they're asking about conflict management, or if they're asking about how you've dealt with pressure, or those type of things. So use good examples. So go back and look at a time that you were in a project and, your project deadline was really, really tight, and how did you manage that? What was the outcome? And then try and keep yeah, practice your responses out loud. It's silly to think, but you know, standing in front of the mirror or even just writing them down and saying it out loud, the more you do it, the more comfortably you'll answer them. You'll see some competencies will overlap. So you'll prepare a few answers and you'll be able to, when approached with a question, draw from the information that you've put together. And then you're going to use the STAR method, which I'm going to cover now. So the STAR method is, S is for situation. So you're going to set the scene. So you're going to describe your situation, what you were in, you know, what happened. Task is, you know, what was the challenge? What did you overcome? What needed to be done in that situation? Action, how did you overcome it? So what happened? What did you do? What action did you take? What action did other people take? What was, you know, what actually happened during that situation? R is the result. So what was the outcome? So this is the thing that happened. This is what you were supposed to do. This is how you reacted to it. And, you know, essentially, this is how it ended. This was the result, you know, following your actions. So an example of a STAR method interview is, you know, tell me about a time that you had to work under pressure. What was the situation and what was the outcome? So that's typically how a competency-based interview question will be structured. So it'll be, tell me about a time that you had to deal with a conflict situation, or tell me about a time that, you know, so they're giving you an opportunity to describe a situation. An answer will be something along the lines of, last year I was a waiter at a sports bar during the Rugby World Cup final. The restaurant was fully booked and one of the waiters called in sick on the last minute. Pressure was high because it was our biggest day of the year. And we had a lot of guests coming in, or multiple parties of 10 or more that were paying a lot of money to be there. So obviously people had booked in advance. What was the task? So I already had 8 tables that I had to deal with when one of the large parties walked in. We soon realized that the waiter that requested was the one that was off sick. And hating to leave customers disappointed, I asked the front of house manager if I could take on this table or if I could assist them. What was the action? Always believing in transparency. So the action or the result, always believing in transparency. I informed the table up front that of the situation that we're in. So obviously the waiter that they had asked for was off sick, and then, you know, asked them to get their drinks up front, and that I would need to be away for a little while because, you know, while I was getting this new party settled in. Okay, so dealing with the tables I was already dealing with. And then what was the result? I left that night with the biggest tips I've ever received, and my customers thanked me for being so proactive and transparent. So it's a silly, you know, example. And I use the example of a waiter because a lot of the people that join us are sometimes graduates, and people think that, you know, your waitering experience or your retail experience isn't necessarily useful, but you can use examples during your waitering or your retail experience because it's customer service, it's dealing with people, that you can pull from those experiences to put together these questions. Examples of your unstructured interviews would be, and I think it's the most dreaded question in the world, is tell me about yourself. I'm going to touch on this question because most places most interviews are going to ask you this question. So it's a toughie, but again, if you practice it enough, you'll be comfortable in answering it. Or walk me through your CV. Tell me about your career history, those type of things. This question, you're literally going to go through your CV. You can either start at the beginning. So I tend to go, okay, well, let me start at the beginning of my career. I graduated in, can't remember, but it was a long time ago. And then my first role was this, and that role. And then you're just going to highlight your major points. So my first role was this, my major points were this. From there, I moved on to this company where I was involved in XYZ. Then I went on to that company. And now it brings me to my current role. So you literally do a short synopsis of your CV where you highlight and maybe pick out some accomplishments when you do that walkthrough. So, if there's 1 or 2 times that you felt you were really successful in certain roles, this is your chance to mention it. Describe yourself to me. That's linked a lot to tell me about yourself. Strengths and weaknesses. Strengths and weaknesses, as much as people think this question is very outdated, it is asked a lot. So it's very important that when preparing for an interview, if you don't know the type of interview that you're going into, think about it. Think about 3. People always ask for 3. So think about 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses. I hate the word weaknesses. So I look for areas of development that you can look at related to your work. So don't make it something personal. So a strength like I'm good at, I would probably say I'm good at dealing with people. I have very good interpersonal skills, and maybe you can relate it to something. So an example is XYZ, and then your areas of development. Look for something, but look for something that you can either improve on or relate it to improving on something. So it's important not to just say, I'm really bad at time management because I'm never on time. It's, if you are, just try and tell us how you're trying to improve that. But I've, lately started keeping a schedule, and through that schedule been able to improve my time management skills, stuff like that. But prepare yourself for it. There's a lot of reading material out there to help you prepare for these type of questions. These type of questions also show people that you're able to do some self-reflection. Your strengths might feel like you're boasting, but your weaknesses or your areas of development show an organization that you're able to look at yourself and see what are maybe not your strongest points and how you can develop those and do a little better. And then what motivates you? Not a common question, but people still do ask it. So, what drives you or what motivates you? And I think the easiest way to prepare for this one is just look at, why you want the role, or why you do what you do. So for me, what motivates me is I like having good customer engagement. I like having candidates that are happy. So that motivates me to increase my service levels so that I have positive reactions from my clients and my candidates. So obviously there are many more questions, or these open-ended questions that you can look at, and there's a lot of reading that you can do on these, but I would say just pick a few. These are the major ones. Tell me about yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, what motivates you, and the one that's not mentioned here that I think people like to ask is, why do you want to work for this organization? And that's where you're going to do your homework about the company that you're recruiting with, and why you want to work for them. Moving on to the tell me about yourself. So it's a biggie, and chances are in most interview situations you're going to be answered this. So here we don't want to know about what you did in high school, who you were in primary school, about all of your family life and stuff. I want to know about who you are professionally. Give me a short synopsis about who you are professionally. What are your biggest, why are you qualified, or what are your biggest selling points? So those strengths that I told you to go look at just now. What is most impressive now? So what have you accomplished in your recent career that you can mention to me now? What are your competencies relevant to the job? And why are you here? So why are you here for this interview? So, you're going to give me a short synopsis. Tell me about your biggest strengths or accomplishments. Tell me about a little bit about you related to this role, and then rope it into, and that's why I'm interested in this position, because I enjoy XYZ. The company deals with this and this, and those two marry. It's kind of like your elevator pitch, which I mentioned before, but it needs to be concise, it needs to be confident, and essentially you want to do this in under 2 minutes. So you want to be able to answer this question in under 2 minutes. So don't start with, well, it started off when I was in high school, and on the rugby team and stuff like that. That's too much information. The do's and don'ts about the tell me about yourself. So do focus on quantifiable details, like your strengths, your accomplishments, stuff like that. Do highlight your personality, because it's another way to just, it's an icebreaker essentially. So, show a little bit about who you are to the individual that you're talking to. Connect your skills to the job. So this is where also you're going to have to do that little bit of research and homework. So connecting your skills to the job that you're doing. Briefly mention your hobbies or intellectual development or something like that. So things that you're interested in. But if you enjoy knitting on the weekends, that maybe too much information. But give a little bit of insight into yourself, but not too much. Don't spend too much time on your hobbies and your interests. Spend more time on your quantifiable details, like your strengths and those type of things. And then I can't say this enough, write an example down and practice it with everything, with your questions to your strengths, your weaknesses, your type of pressure questions, conflict questions, and most importantly, your tell me about yourself question. Write it down. Practice it, because the 10th time you've read it, when somebody asks you this question, you're going to be so easy, it'll just flow, and you won't be as nervous, because you're not going to be taken by it. You will have practiced it, and then you'll just go into it. You'll just, I've always gone, I've always had a piece of paper where I've had my practice questions and my tell me about yourself and all of that, and then before an interview, it's like you're studying for an exam, and I study my questions and I practice them, so that when I'm confronted with a question, it just flows, it flows easier. So the don't go too far back. So I've mentioned that already. Don't tell me about what you did in primary school. Not too much personal information. As much as your interviewer might love kids, they might not need to know about, the snotty nose that you had to deal with this morning because you have toddlers. Don't list just vague strengths and stuff like that. Make it relevant to the role and make it something that you can back up. So if you're going to list a strength, so if you're going to say that I'm really good with people or have good interpersonal skills, back it up. Try to tell me why you say that. We don't need a regurgitation of your CV or a summary of your CV word for word. I've got the CV. I've read the CV. I want to know who you are behind the CV. And then don't just ramble. And the rambling happens when you haven't prepared. So that's where you feel thrown by this question all of a sudden, and you're like, and then you just start saying words. So just prepare. That's actually the best do and the best thing I can tell you. So an example is something like, this is not me, I made this up. I'm an innovative HR manager with 8 years of experience managing all aspects of the HR function, from recruiting to training and benefits for a Fortune 500 company. So here I've told you what I am, how long I've been doing it, and what are my key skills in the role. So recruiting, training, and the type of organization I've worked for. So Fortune 500. I spent the last 6 years developing my skills as a customer service manager for a mega company, where I've been involved in several performance awards. We have won several performance awards and been promoted twice. I love managing teams and solving problems. So again, I'm telling you more about my skills. Yeah, I've thrown in some achievements. So I've won some awards and I've been promoted twice. So that tells you a little bit more about me. I love managing teams and solving customer problems. So here I'm also alluding to leadership skills and my problem solving ability. And then why am I here? Although I love my current role, I feel like I'm ready to move on for my next challenging assignment. And that's why this position excites me. So that relates to the why am I here in this interview right now? So yeah, there's obviously a lot more research you can do. But again, like I said, just write it down. I think the key thing for me is writing it down, practicing it over and over again until it just comes naturally when you sit in that interview. And I promise you, if you get to the point where you've practiced it, it'll just flow. It'll come out, and you'll feel so much better. The next section I'm going to touch is online interviews. So due to our dear friend COVID has changed our lives, I think we've always done a lot of online interviews or Skype interviews or Zoom interviews, as well. Zoom is a new platform for me, interviews as such, but it's very common now. So online interviews are the way of the future for, I don't know, for how long we're going to be in the situation that we are. So at least your first or second round interview will probably be online, and then you might have a meet and greet in person where you meet the line manager that you're dealing with. So it's very, very, very important that you prepare yourself for this type of thing. So it's not just you know, an online session where, you know, you're just chatting with somebody. It is a very, very serious, it's an interview as such. So I want you to treat it like you would a face-to-face interview. So first tip I can give you is check your tech, know your tech, check your audio, check your connectivity. If you've never used Zoom before, or you've never used Teams before, or something like that, maybe get a friend or a family member, set up an online meeting, familiarize yourself with the platform, so that not on the day you're not scrambling. Oh, where's the button? How do I share my screen? How do I check my sound? You know, stuff like that. Familiarize yourself with the platform that you're using. So download the app ahead of time. With Zoom and all of that, Zoom, MS Teams, most of them, you'll get a link. So if you don't have the app downloaded, you can go to the web platform where they'll give you a link to the meeting or an access code or something like that. But if you can download the app before the time, do it, and make sure you have the right information. If you haven't gotten a link for your Zoom interview or your Teams interview, or I don't know who still uses Skype, but for a little Skype interview, then ask for it. Say, listen, please don't forget to send me the link. And familiarize yourself with it. So, you know, I had a candidate a little while back, and, you know, I took that on myself. I took it for granted that, you know, everybody knows how Teams works. So he didn't know that, you know, join the meeting here, you actually click on that little line. So like I'm saying, get to know your tech. I spent a lot of time on that, but it's very important. Get a distraction-free zone. So try and get a place where there's not as much noise. You don't run the risk of, you know, people running in or barging in on you or that type of thing. I've had a job interview before where one of my kids broke into the room and crawled onto my lap. Luckily, the person I was interviewing with was pretty cool. It was during lockdown, so everybody's kids were running around. But it throws you off your game. So it's not necessarily about how the individual is going to take it, because nowadays with the way our world is in, it doesn't really matter. Everyone's got their kids running around. But it throws you off your game. So you're going to be halfway through your tell me about yourself, or given examples about, you know, your strengths and weaknesses, or your situational question. And it's just, you know, it's going to throw you off. And then you're going to be like a little frazzled and stuff. So just try and get that distraction-free zone. Be on time. Any interview, please just be on time. But for online interviews, you can't be too early. So the room as such might be used by for another session. So you're either going to go into a waiting room or something like that. 2 to 3 minutes. So if your appointment's at 10 o'clock, log on at 2 minutes to 10. Having prepared beforehand that you know everything's fine, so that at 2 minutes to 10 when you log in, it's all good. And then dress for success. So it sounds silly, but a lot of people don't necessarily dress well for online interviews, but still, you know, suit up, people, wear your suit. Do exactly the same as you would for a face-to-face interview. That's all I can say. Speak slowly and clearly. So, you know, maybe the person you're speaking to won't have the best, you know, internet connection or something like that. So, you know, just speak slowly, try and speak clearly. I know you're going to be nervous because it's still an interview, but try and just slow down your pace. And if you do catch yourself speaking too quickly or feeling nervous, you can always just apologize and say, oh, sorry, I'm speaking so quickly. I'm a little nervous. People handle that really well. So a professional profile name. So on a lot of these platforms you can put your name on. Maybe you use this as a platform where you were chatting with your mates first, and you know, it was Jacky Wacky 66. Not necessarily the most professional for a work situation. So make sure your profile name is professional. Look at the camera. Try and sort of look at the camera as if you were looking at the individual that you're speaking to, which I know is kind of awkward sometimes because you feel like you're just speaking to a machine like me now. But yeah, try and speak to the person as such, and then take it seriously. So take it as seriously as you would a normal interview. I have a little quick video for you guys to just sort of summarize what I've just said, which you can take a look at.
It's hard enough to interview face-to-face, let alone in front of a camera and microphone. But video interviews are becoming increasingly more common in the hiring process. But don't sweat it. Here are some common mistakes to look out for and tips for acing your video interview.
This is perfect. Hey, so thank you for giving me this opportunity to interview with you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am so excited.
Do you like my new hairstyle?
Taylor, I mentioned to you, I'm in an interview right now. Please go away. So sorry about that. So as I was mentioning, I'm excited about this opportunity, and thank you so much again for... Are you serious? I cannot. I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
In case you missed them the first time, here's a recap of the top 5 video interview tips. And remember, interviewing is a skill, and as with any other skill, you get better with practice. Good luck.
So I know it did say
It's hard enough
oh,
to
no,
interview
sorry.
face.
It did talk about, you know, a video, but it's the same for online. So as long as, yeah, use the tips, take it professionally, act like you would for a normal interview. So the next one I'm going to cover now is, do you have any questions? Very important part of the interview process. And the short answer is yes, of course you have questions. You always have questions. It's going to show that you've done your research, and you're also trying to determine whether the role is right for you. So ask questions. It shows your interest in the company, it shows your interest in the role, and it shows your interest in the person that you're interviewing with. And my favorite thing, as always, it shows that you've done your research. So the types of questions you can ask revolve around the actual job. So what are the skills and experience you're looking for in your ideal candidate? A nice one that I like to ask is, what are the challenges that the individual will face in this role? Performance-wise, what are the performance expectations for this individual over the next 6, 9, or 12 months? I mean, you can choose what type of questions you like to ask. The interview itself, so if you're interviewing with a line manager, this person is potentially going to be your boss. So ask them, how long have you been with the company? What do you like? What do you like about working here? What is your favorite part about working here? The things I like about these questions, it's actually for you as the interviewer, or the interviewee rather. So it gives you an idea of what you like about the company. And it'll give you an idea as to the culture, because you're going to ask questions about the culture. But when you're asking about what's your favorite thing about working here, that's going to give you a very good indication of the type of company you're working for. And then obviously asking about the team. So if it is a team role, who am I going to be working with? How's it structured? How do I fit into the structure? And then the culture, like I said, what is the company culture like? What is the team culture like? To give you an idea if it's a company you want to work for. And then the next steps. Always ask about the next steps in the interviewing process. Where to from here? What are the next steps? Is there another interview? Is there anything that I can provide you with? Do you want copies of my qualifications? Do you want reference details? Those type of things. So yeah, that's it. That brings me to the close. Questions, Natasha.
So today it seems to be very quiet with regards to questions. I know you did cover the questions now, but I do have a question from an anonymous attendee that asks, how do you avoid your question sounding scripted? In other words, how often should I practice to avoid a scripted answer?
So I would say if you've been invited for an interview, so I don't know. Well, personally for me, I would practice a few days before, a couple of times a day, just to read through it, because the more you practice, the more natural it's going to feel. So you don't want it to be scripted. And in that situation, it might not feel scripted. So I would just say, at least a day or two before, so that if you've done it an hour before, then it's going to feel scripted, because then it's going to be like you reading off a piece of paper. So take a day or two so that you can go through it a couple of times, so that it feels a little bit more natural.
And I've got two questions. The first one being, can I bring my own copy of my CV to an interview? That is asked by Samantha. And Tendani asks, is repetition of information in the interview okay?
So CV, probably not necessary. Samantha, you can probably ask your recruiter or the hiring manager, but nowadays you will have emailed it to somebody, so they're either going to have a soft copy or printed out a hard copy. So it's, unless they've specifically asked you to bring one, it's unnecessary. Tendani, repetition of information in the sense of, strengths, or I'm not sure. If you're telling me tell me about yourself, a little bit about your achievements, and then during your covering your career history, telling me a little bit more about your achievements, in that sense, repetition, it's fine. It's as long as you're not just telling me the same thing over and over again. But if you can relate it to, then just say, as I previously mentioned, when I was with this company, I was, the top 10 consultant for this and this and this, or that type of thing. So in that sense, that's how I would handle repetition.
Okay, what is the next question is also from an anonymous attendee. What is your opinion on the prevalence of implicit bias by interviewers?
I think, okay, so the best way I'm going to answer this, I think that's why a lot of organizations use structured interviews, or an interview format, that you try and rule out that bias, that you're comparing each individual to a certain set of questions or standards. I don't think, I'm not really sure how to answer it, but I wouldn't say. I would say it's ruled out, because most organizations have a certain process that they go through when interviewing. So that's probably how they rule out the bias.
Okay, so at this point, I would like to ask students that are online, if you have questions, please do not use the chat function. Use the Q&A to send us your questions, please.
Oopsie. People are quiet. tonight.
All right, so Jacky, if you have responded to all the questions, I think it has really been managed well in the presentation, and therefore we do not see a lot of questions coming from the audience. So with that, I think I'm going to hand over to Natasha, and then we can just say the highs and the goodbyes if there are no more questions coming up. Nat?
Okay, we do have 2 more questions. So let's just, sorry, my screen is playing around with me. We have one that asks, do you have to mention where you are originally from during the interview?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's necessary. If maybe you saw that person's from there, no, but I don't think it's necessary at all. If you're living in Centurion or wherever now, that's relevant. So as long as you are able to work in the place that you're working in, yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay, and then we have, I've had an online interview with a potential employer, and I have now been asked to come in for a personal interview. What can I expect in this interview?
So hoping that whoever you're dealing with will probably give you a little bit more advice. So the online interview, I'm not sure how it was structured the first time. Maybe they just covered a little bit of get to know you, covered your work history. Your second interviews tend to go a little bit more into detail. So they'll dig a little bit further into your skills and your experience, what you can do, how you relate to the role, and that type of thing. So I would prepare questions around how you relate to the job, also a little bit on those strengths and weaknesses and those type of things, and a little bit more on why you want that specific role. So it's just going to go probably dig a little bit deeper into your skills and your background.
Okay, and then Jacky Alexandra asks, what advice do you have for older applicants, say someone that's around 55, so if they are going for a job interview?
Same advice for everyone. Just prepare, relate your skills to the role. So, I think you're letting age factor in where it shouldn't be. So if you've already been invited for an interview, it shouldn't be an issue, where age shouldn't be an issue at all. Maybe because you have a bigger or a more expansive work history, focus on possibly the last 10 years or your last 3 roles, rather than starting from the very beginning. So that's probably the best advice I can give is look at the most either relevant or recent roles. So maybe the 3 or 4 most recent roles, or the last 10 years of experience as compared to your entire career. So that could be, just narrow it down a little bit for you. But otherwise, the rest is all the same.
Then Patson asks, advice on dealing with stress before interviews.
Take a deep breath. I think, Almi and I have spoken about this before. Stress or nerves are natural. Nerves mean that it's an important thing for you. So it's absolutely normal to be stressed about an interview or to be nervous about an interview. It means you care about the process. If you're very nervous, very, very nervous, I have had candidates tell the interviewer, break the ice with that. We're all human. We're prone to nerves. But yeah, take a deep breath, have a drink of water, try and calm down a little bit. And essentially just think about it. And I always joke with people. I say, think about the fact that it's like a blind date. So you're just going to go meet somebody to find out a little bit more about them, and take it as a learning experience. So just, try and look for the positive in the situation.
Okay, then we have, Sorry, I'm just moving my screen here. The best way to answer, what are your salary expectations? This comes from Patson as well.
So I think the best way to answer that, and it's the advice I give to my candidates, is have a range. So you would know what your minimum is that you're able to offer, and obviously your ideal, and I'd go somewhere in between there. So if my minimum that I'm able to accept a month is 20,000 Rand and my ideal is 30, I'd probably say I'm looking between like 23 and 27 type thing. So give a range. I would say don't give a definitive number. So don't say I want 30,000 Rand a month, full stop, because that doesn't give any playing room, but give a range. So know what your lowest low is, and work from there and give a range.
Okay, then I have a question. Can you maybe go more into the attire for a bit, with regards to attire in more detail? I'm interviewing for a psychometrist position at a medilegal practice at a hospital, and I'm not sure how to dress.
Dress, I would just say semi-formal, professional. So if you are either wear, nothing too revealing, so no cleavage, no open arms and shoulders. You can either wear like a 3/4 top, or if you wear a short top, a proper sleeve, or a long sleeve shirt. I would say probably a collared shirt. If you're not wearing a collared shirt, maybe wear a jacket. You can wear a pencil skirt or a skirt, as long as it's not too short again, or pants. That is fine. You don't necessarily have to wear the highest high heels, but just professional shoes. Yeah, that's probably the best advice I can give you. Just neat and professional. It doesn't have to be overly formal, but just a little bit more conservative. I'd say just, neat and professional.
Then I have, will you be disadvantaged if you ask for an online interview if you are not in that current city?
No, because I get this a lot. As long as the organization is willing to relocate someone for that role, you're more than welcome to ask for an online interview. I've had candidates that were perhaps in Johannesburg, but weren't in Johannesburg at the moment, so they were traveling or something like that. And the beauty of the current situation that we're in is most organizations have facilities for online interviews, so you will probably be able to be accommodated. Just highlight it in the beginning. That's all.
Anonymous asks, how would you say the best way is to navigate having to explain personal circumstances that affected my work or study history? I've been told that this would come up in an interview. And then Anonymous also says, thank you for all the tips and advice. It has really helped.
I would just be honest. So without going into too much detail, just be honest. So if I've had a lot of candidates that started studying and couldn't finish studying due to, financial constraints, maybe a parent fell ill or something, and, they couldn't afford their tuition anymore, so they stopped studying for a little while, did a couple of part-time jobs, saved some money, and then continued studying. Please keep in mind the people that you're interviewing with are still human. So if you have a personal circumstance that has affected your study or career or that type of thing, explain it, but don't give me a broad overview. Give me the summary of events that gives me enough information to understand, but without going into too much of the gory detail.
We are down to the last 5 questions. I would like to thank all our participants. I'm going to close the Q&A at this point. Due to the time, we would like to answer all 5 questions. Stephanie asks, if your last position ended negatively, how do you make a positive spin as the job description advertised one job and the interview was a bit different, but the actual daily work environment was completely something else?
So I've experienced this also quite a bit. So you don't have to badmouth an employer in a situation like this. You can, and it's not a negative thing if you say, you know, when I took on the role, there were certain expectations. But when I actually started doing the job, the role was a little bit different and doesn't necessarily align with my career goals or where I see my career going. So I decided that it's better that I start looking for another opportunity, because if I spend too much time in this role, you know, it's not necessarily going to take me where my career wants to go.
We have another question, but you've basically answered it now, where it said we shouldn't badmouth the old company. So how should we tell the interview, or how should we communicate this in the interview for the reason of leaving the old company? So you've basically answered that one now as well. Then we ask, Anonymous asks, should you ask about a job salary during the interview?
So I would say not during the first interview. I hope by the time you've been invited for an interview, you've been told about what the salary is. So before you've been invited for an interview, you have a right to ask those questions. What is, you know, where is it based? What is the salary, etc. But I wouldn't necessarily bring it up in the first interview. If you get called back for a second round and salary still hasn't been discussed with you, then yes, you're more than welcome to say, I'd just like to find out, what is the salary range for this role?
Okay, then Anonymous asks, sometimes 10 years back CVs cannot cover all necessary experiences required for the job. Can you use more than 10 years back, or a CV from 10 years back?
Of course you can. So I gave that example to with regards to relevance. So some people that have a long career history, maybe the first few roles in their career weren't relevant. But if you feel like a role that you had 15 years ago was maybe the role that pivoted you into where you are now, and is very relevant to the role that you're interviewing for, and the experience that you have, then by all means mention it. Mention the company, mention the skills that you've gained, by all means. If it's related to what you're interviewing for, no issues, go for it.
And our very last question comes from Amira, where she asks for, can you give her examples of some of the questions that can be asked at the end of the interview? So
you asking the question is what I'm assuming. So what you can ask an employer. Then yeah, it's some of the ones that I mentioned. I always like to ask, so go for 3 or 4. So I like to ask, what are the next steps? So where to from here? Literally just like that. What are the next steps in this process? I like to ask a little bit more about the team and what the what you as a manager expect from this individual. So what are the expectations in this role? And also, you know, what are the challenges in this role? So that you can also, the reason why I ask those is it gives you opportunity. So what is expected, or what are the challenges? Then you can go, oh, you know, I've dealt with that in the past, you know, where I've had a difficult situation with X, Y, and Z, and this is how I overcame it. So you've asked for challenges in this position, and you can maybe relate how you can overcome those challenges. It just gives you an opportunity to ask more questions, or to give more information. But I would say just look for 2 or 3 that you can ask. But I'll send my presentation to Almi, and the last few slides, there are example questions that you can look at.
Okay, and with that, we have then reached the end of the session. So for those who are still online, if you have missed the previous webinars with Jacky Pillay, you're more than welcome to view the recordings, which have been posted on YouTube under the Golden Key Southern Africa channel. So as Jacky mentioned, she will share her presentation, and this recording will be posted on YouTube as well. So for those who did want to have examples of the questions, you're more than welcome to have a look on YouTube. So thank you very much, Jacky, for a very informative webinar, and thank you everyone for attending. At this point, if you are ready to leave, you can click end at the bottom of your screen in the red block and exit the webinar. So thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you so much. It was great chatting with everybody again, and I hope it was useful.
Thank you. Hi, Almi and Unita.
Thank you, Natasha. I think it went well.
Hi.
It's interesting for me that we have so fewer candidates. Oh, my signal is not good.
Yes, and
I mean, when we did the first, yeah,
there's a lot of
what's wrong
international
with my-
students this year. The session, a lot of international students, very few South African.
yeah. I wonder, is the South Africans writing exams at the moment?
They have started.
So maybe it's that. So the Golden Key Academy is pestering us for more webinars, but in the previous one, we had more than 200 participants to this specific webinar. And today we had 50.
56,
Yeah.
but there were 266 that were actually registered for today's session.
Registered.
Yeah.
But so I would have expected at least 100 participants.
Yeah.
So it just shows you, I think people are less keen to attend. I still have the financial management one that I want to do. Then we have Juanita's.
Yes.
Then we have the PhD journey that I want to do. But we have to be careful when we do it. Otherwise, I know the pressure is on that we need to generate content for the academy, but I'm not sure if the need is dwindling, whether we should actually do it. But anyway, yeah.
But I think
We'll
South
see.
Africans are now reaching the end of their year where America is starting with their year. So it's different times of the year where everything is fresh for them. And our students are like, okay, we're done for this year.
Yeah, I also think people are really zoomed out. But anyway.
Okay, now at least we are done on time and Melissa can start her meeting without stress.
Yes, exactly.
Well done.
Thank you.
I just have to make a comment. Don't show cleavage, eh?
Show cleavage.
Not you.
Oh,
Not you.
because I have,
When you go for interview.
yeah, I have a V.
When people go for interview.
No, not you. But
No, she said in general.
yeah, but she showed cleavage anyway. Good night,
I was
everybody.
thinking of
All
that.
right.
Good night.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye.